and thanks everyone for being here today. I want to especially thank our sponsors who made today possible. And I also want to acknowledge some of my partners in this work with mindfulness, and especially with mindfulness-based dementia care, including the Presence Care Project, my colleagues, especially in Michigan, at Health Partners in Minnesota, and in San Francisco. So I want to start by just setting some intentions. I think in normal classes, people call these objectives, but this is a mindfulness class, so I'd like to think of them more as what are our intentions for our time together? Well, one intention is just for all of us to better understand mindfulness, what it is, and how it might benefit dementia care partners. We see the poll here. I think everyone can see this with who's in the audience today, which is so wonderful. A lot of unpaid caregivers are here, which is great because we're going to learn about ways mindfulness can help care partners. And it looks like some of you have tried mindfulness or meditation practice. Others have done mindfulness-based techniques, Tai Chi or yoga, and some are just curious but haven't really tried yet. So how exciting. What a great group to begin again with. So we're going to learn a little bit more about mindfulness. For those of you who it's your first time, that's great. You'll learn for the first time. We'll be learning ways to bring awareness, connection, love, and compassion into our daily lives. We will review some mindful habits and practices that can lower stress and enhance well-being. And we're going to take some time today throughout this presentation to practice new mindfulness skills that then you can continue to put into practice at home, or road test, if you will. So the invitation today is to really be here. And I just want to acknowledge before we start how difficult it is to take time out of your busy day, especially caregiving, to just be present. Just be present to learn something new. It took a lot to get here. You did it. And now the invitation is to really just be here. Not somewhere else in your mind, not in the future or the past, but just right here, right now. So that is a practice in and of itself. The invitation is to be curious about how you're experiencing the things that we practice, to fully give yourself this time. So much of the time we're rushing from here to there. What would it be like to just fully give yourself permission to not do anything, just to be and listen and be present? That's a practice. I invite you to, in real time, observe what's occurring in your mind, in your body, with an attitude of curiosity and wonder, like you're experiencing things for the first time, as if you're a child seeing a flower for the first time, with a sense of awe, kindness, sweetness. That's the best way, I think, to experience learning something new. I invite you also to decide what you need to remain present, to remain with me, with us this whole time. And maybe that's getting rid of distractions, perhaps turning or silencing your cell phone, or closing out your email, and just making a conscious decision that you're going to practice being present. That said, there's an invitation to take care of yourself. If you need, we're not going to take a break, so if you need a break, please take a break. This session is recorded. If someone you're caring for comes into your space and doesn't want to sit and join you, but needs your attention, please see if you can bring presence to that interaction. If you can be present throughout handling the distraction, settling, and then maybe even taking a few breaths, and then rejoining the group. practicing bringing a little humor to whatever comes up. If something is distracting, perhaps practicing bringing a little smile to it, a little, here we go kind of attitude. Trying on that attitude like a new shirt might be an interesting practice for you. And then I also encourage you to let go of note taking. Just give yourself permission to trust that whatever it is that I say that's important will be on the PDF that you receive. And for now, you're just really practicing being here, being mindful of the present moment. So let's begin. And since this is a mindful class, we're going to begin with a mindful check-in. So this quote, when I am constantly running, there is no time for being. When there is no time for being, there is no time for listening. So let us listen first to ourselves, because if we cannot listen to ourselves, how can we ever listen to someone else? So I invite you to take this moment to sit right here where you are and don't change a thing. Just listen. If it feels comfortable for you, you can close or soften your eyes. Turning inward, just becoming aware of the sensations in your body. Maybe noticing your fingers and your toes. Maybe noticing if there are any areas where you're holding tension, perhaps in your thighs or shoulders, maybe your neck or your jaw or your eyes. And if you find tension anywhere, just allowing yourself or inviting yourself to soften that if it can soften. Maybe even saying to yourself, soften. Just notice what's here right now. Maybe you can feel your breathing. Maybe there are sounds. Thoughts, emotions. And I invite you to reflect upon why you're here right now in this moment. Why did you choose this presentation on mindfulness? What were you hoping to learn? Most of you are care partners, so I invite you to reflect on expanding your reflection to include what kind of care partner would you like to be? How did you think mindfulness might help that? What qualities would you like to cultivate as a caregiver? Maybe qualities you already have that you want to grow, or perhaps qualities that you feel you don't have enough of, that you'd like to grow. Plant a seed that you water. When you're ready, I invite you to Open your eyes and maybe just take a moment to notice how you're feeling now, maybe how it might be different from when you first arrived. And I invite you to respond in the chat to share with others, what qualities would you like to cultivate as a care partner? What would you like more of? What would you like to water and grow and cultivate? Patience, resilience, kindness, non-reactivity, yeah, more smiles, fun, connection, joy, feeling of calm, peacefulness, sense of humor, acceptance. It's a big one. Courage, happiness, calmness, ease of communication, compassion, presence. These are all wonderful qualities that we're cultivating, and you can begin practicing that right now in these moments when we stop and listen in to where we are in this moment. We can ask ourselves, where are these qualities in this moment? Where is patience in this moment? Where is kindness? Where is soothing? Where are these things? Thank you so much for sharing. So we're going to sit with this just a moment. I invite you to close and soften your eyes once again, if you feel comfortable. Closing our eyes or softening our eyes allows us to turn inward. Just sit where we are without changing anything. And again, just noticing the sensations in your body, wherever they're most noticeable. Maybe you notice a tension that you can soften. Maybe you notice a lot of thinking, or maybe you notice a tingling or a coolness or a warmth, just whatever's here right now. Tuning into any sounds that may be present in your environment. Perhaps noticing that you're breathing. Seeing if you can follow a full breath from the very beginning as it fills your lungs up on an inhale. Letting go, softening on an exhale, and then just allowing your attention to rest gently on your breath wherever you feel it most strongly. Perhaps noticing any changes from when you first arrived. Taking a moment perhaps to ask yourself, where are these qualities that you want to cultivate in this moment? Is there calm present? Is there patience? Kindness? Compassion? Can you call those up in this moment? What does it feel like in your body when you invite the quality of patience to arise? Just noticing. I invite you to open your eyes again when you're ready, noticing this transition. Christine Biden, who's someone living with dementia, said, "I can be a care partner with you, communicating my true feelings, my true needs, so that you can walk alongside me, adjusting and compensating for these expressed needs as we face this struggle together." So, what is mindfulness? Well, you've just practiced twice mindfulness in the first few minutes of class. It's probably the first class you ever did that in. Mindfulness is a practice. It means paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment without judgment, right? What did you notice in our brief practices when we brought our attention to the present moment? This is mindfulness, bringing our attention to the now. Mindfulness, attention to the present moment, takes some practice to cultivate, but it can be really rewarding. Mindfulness is a practice and a way of being in wise relationship with the moment and with our lives. It's about becoming less reactive and more intentionally present with what's happening in our lives, for our lives. It's a willingness to be curious about our perspective and even modify our perspective, develop a clearer perspective. It is fostered by assuming a stance of an impartial witness to your own experience. When we sit in stillness, it's as if we step back and watch what's happening in our body and our mind as an impartial witness. It's cultivating something called meta-awareness, awareness of awareness. It's observing our impulses and ultimately developing the skillful means to respond thoughtfully to life as it unfolds, moment to moment. Mindfulness is not getting rid of thoughts or emptying the mind. Instead, it's developing a clearer perspective and understanding of what's happening in the mind and the body. So, how do we cultivate mindfulness? Well, cultivating mindfulness is training the mind to develop a greater awareness of the present moment, including what's happening in our physical body, our sensations, our thoughts, the quality of our mind. Is it racing? Is it still? Our feelings, what emotions may come up when we sit still. And doing all of this with a spirit of wonder, of childlike wonder and curiosity and friendliness toward ourselves. It's about seeing what is present now and inclining toward that with a sense of openness and friendliness. Not being in the past or the future, but being in the now and curious about what that's like. What is mindfulness meditation? Well, it's a tool that we can use to train our brains to be more present, to pay greater attention. What happens when it's a practice of learning to notice when we sit still. It's a practice of noticing when our mind wanders away, and then gently bringing it back to the present moment, usually by focusing on something that's in the present moment. One thing that's always in the present moment is breathing. You can't be breathing in the past or in the future. So breathing is a good place to let your attention rest because it's always in the present. You noticed earlier we practiced with allowing our attention to rest on sounds, also always in the present, on body sensations, always in the present, right? So it's this practice of stopping and paying attention to something that's in the present moment, like the breath. So for most of us, What happens when we stop and we try to place our attention on a single thing, on breathing? Well, for most people, when we sit and be still and focus on the breath, our minds take off and run away. Our minds run away like crazy. That's normal. That's part of the practice. Training our minds to focus on the breath or on the present moment is a lot like training a puppy to sit on your lap. When you first put the puppy in your lap, what happens? Well, he might sit there for a minute and stay focused. He might stay there for a second, but most likely he'll get up and run away pretty quick and play with something really active and rambunctious. Well, this is what puppies do, right? Puppies are like this. They run, they play. This is what they're built to do. And this is what minds do too. To train a puppy to sit in our laps, we simply notice and delight where the puppy has gone after he leaves our laps. And then gently, with a smile and perhaps with a couple of kisses and caresses, we bring the puppy back to our laps and we say, stay. Just stay. We do the same with our minds. We simply notice where our minds have gone off to, and in that moment that we notice that our minds have jetted off somewhere else, this is a moment of mindfulness. This is a moment of success. We notice, my mind is somewhere else. And with great curiosity and kindness, and maybe a smile, we invite our attention back to the present, to the breath, and say, stay. Over time, the puppy will settle without making it do it. It will just naturally do that. Just like the mind will settle over time, just on its own. We don't have to make it settle. This practice of bringing our attention back again and again to the breath settles the mind on its own. The mind will become calm and centered on its own without our effort. Now, when we learn something new, like mindfulness techniques or any new skill, we're often really harsh on ourselves, aren't we? We beat ourselves up. Why don't you know this? You're so dumb. Whatever these awful things we say to ourselves are. This is kind of like training a puppy by beating it up. We can train a puppy like this. We can hit it when it doesn't stay in our laps. We can beat it and say, stay, right? And it may work. The puppy may stay in our laps, but it will be very anxious and fearful and scared. So bringing our puppy back with kindness and care will boost our self-confidence, our self-compassion, our confidence, our resilience. So our puppy, our mind, we bring it back with love and kindness. We don't beat it up and say, you'll never get this. We acknowledge if we have those thoughts and we say, oh, that's interesting. And we notice if we're on an inhale or an exhale and just begin again. So that's what mindfulness meditation practice really is. It's simple, but also really challenging. So let's practice again. Let's try this again. Now, this is probably the first seminar you've ever been in where you literally practice mindfulness 3 times in the first few minutes. So I invite you yet again, maybe I'll even ring my bell. I invite you to soften your eyes. Maybe close your eyes, maybe noticing that you're already becoming familiar with this habit of stopping and turning your attention inward and checking in with yourself, building this habit. Starting by perhaps noticing the breath, noticing that you're breathing, maybe wherever you feel it most, in the belly or the lungs, the chest, or maybe the nostrils. Feeling into the breath as it comes into your body, perhaps softening as you release the breath. Again, if the mind wanders, just Noticing where your little puppy has gone, and with a smile, inviting it back to your lap, back to your breath. Noticing sounds, sensations. Perhaps noticing what it's like to check in with yourself throughout this class or throughout your daily activities, just to stop and check in for a minute, breathing, softening, noticing what's here right now for you. When you're ready, opening the eyes again. And inviting yourself back to begin again. How is this practice helpful for care partners? Well, here are a few things that we know. We know that living with a brain disease is usually unexpected, often unpredictable and frustrating, and very stressful. Most care partners experience chronic physical and our emotional stress, and that weakens our immune systems and can lead to premature aging of cells. It's even been shown in research that stress actually shortens our telomeres, and mindfulness can lengthen them. And these are the end caps of our genes that tell our bodies to age. So we can actually influence that with mindfulness practice. And most care partners are concerned about maintaining their own health and well-being and the health and well-being of their partners. We all know that if our health and well-being isn't good, our partner is going to pick up on that and perhaps be more stressed, him or herself. Many care partners also experience depression and other mood changes that can make caregiving more difficult. So we know that mindfulness can impact and improve depression and change the way we navigate caregiving. Being a caregiver is a lot like being tossed in the ocean. Sometimes the sun is shining and it's calm or even nice. Other times there are 30-foot swells and you keep getting pushed under and you feel like you're drowning. There's nothing that will stop the ocean, right? We cannot stop the ocean. It's the ocean, right? We cannot stop the waves. We cannot control if it's calm or if it's bumpy. All we can do is learn to surf. Mindfulness is surfing 101. Okay? It gives us the skills to understand when we get pushed under, how we can come up perhaps a little more quickly, how we can recognize when we're drowning or when we're calm, and cultivate resilience. Get back up. Notice when things are okay. So Lena Horne says, it's not the load that breaks you down, it's the way you carry it. And mindfulness can help us carry the load differently. It can help us learn to dance with difficulty. Okay, so next we're going to talk about the ways mindfulness can support, 5 ways in particular that mindfulness can support care partners, and some mindfulness practices that we'll practice together that we can learn to support us as we begin again. Okay, so what's the first way that mindfulness can help us? Mindfulness can help us to experience stress differently. Okay, mindfulness practice changes the way care partners experience stress, their perception of it. It doesn't change what's happening in the environment, right? It doesn't change the ocean, but it can change the way we relate to the ocean or to the waves, right? It's like this cartoon, the brain saying, I hate snow. and the heart is saying, oh, you're just using it wrong, right? So it changes our perception of stress, and it can help us be less reactive. It can help us recognize helpful stress versus harmful stress, and most importantly, become deeply familiar with our own stress responses in our bodies, in our minds. What happens when we experience stress? And that helps us to learn and to be really tuned in to when our triggers occur so that we can respond differently. Mindfulness can allow us to recover more quickly from unexpected events and challenges and recommit to healthier activities, to being more kind with ourselves, to acknowledging when things are difficult and supporting ourselves. So, what is stress reactivity? Stress, it actually was designed to keep us safe, right? This sympathetic nervous system, this fight, flight, or freeze system that we have when activated, was designed when people were just becoming people to keep us safe from predators, right? It activates this response so that we can get away from a lion or a tiger or a bear. And it was created to keep us safe in the short term when a lion or a tiger or a bear pops out and threatens us. But actually now, we're not really running away from lions and tigers and bears. We're running away from emails and lots of phone calls and other types of stressors that become more chronic, especially when you're caregiving. And that kind of chronic stress is really harmful. So what started as something to keep us safe from harm actually becomes quite harmful if it's on or activated all the time. So this is where our parasympathetic nervous system comes in. This nervous system that controls resting, digesting, recuperating, recovery. Mindfulness activates our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and digest mode. And what's really cool is that both the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems cannot be activated at the same time. So mindfulness actually turns on your rest and recoup center, and thus turning off your stress center. Spending more time out of this stress reaction is a lifesaver and leads to responding from a more calm and centered presence instead of blindly reacting in the midst of a crisis. So, we all know what it's like to feel hijacked. I call it slipping on the banana peel, right? So let me invite you to take a moment. Most of us won't have to reach that far back, and I can see some of some of you in the chat are even talking about feeling like you're drowning a lot of the times, right? So just take a moment to locate a recent memory of a time when you were activated or stressed or triggered. Maybe your partner did something, maybe they asked you a question for the 100th time today, and you just lost it. You just slipped on the banana peel, and the emotional reaction took over before your brain had time to think. Dr. Goleman says the emotional hijacking is when the emotional brain responds to an event more quickly than the thinking brain. So you just get triggered and react. Can everybody sort of think of a moment when that happened? This is the banana peel, right? This strong and sudden emotion. We will encounter this stress reactivity in mindfulness practice too. When we sit in mindfulness and our minds run all over the place, this is a bit like being hijacked, okay? We're reacting, our minds are reacting, our bodies are reacting. In practice, we learn in a safe space to notice what that feels like and to catch those signs earlier and respond to them with curiosity and greater care rather than harsh criticism and judgment, which only adds more suffering in an already difficult situation. Most of us, when we get hijacked, are pretty darn hard on ourselves afterward. What if we could respond to ourselves with curiosity and kindness in this moment? What if during practice we could sit and notice just for a moment, calling up this moment when you were hijacked and noticing where you feel that in your body? Maybe there's a tensing or a tightness in your chest or your heart space or your arms, or your shoulders maybe rise up. Maybe there's a closing in. What happens when you're stressed or triggered in your body? Stress is an embodied experience. We feel it in our bodies. It's our bodies mobilizing us for action. So when we notice where we can find stress in our bodies, we can often work with breathing through that and softening that stress with our minds. So let's check in. I feel tense in my body and spirit when triggered. And where do you feel that in your body? Is it in your chest? Is it in your arms? Do you feel your gut wrenching in the chest? Maybe in your jaw? Maybe in your thoughts, your brain running away? Maybe heat in the face? Maybe a pulsing in the veins? Shoulders? This is really important, and this is mindfulness. Bringing awareness to our stress reaction can help us notice when we're beginning to be triggered and give us some space to respond differently. Well, John Kabat-Zinn says, one very important domain of our lives and experience that we tend to miss, ignore, abuse, or lose control of as a result of being in automatic pilot mode is our own bodies. We become separated from our own bodies, and our bodies are such a wealth of information for us about how we are doing in the moment. Mindfulness practice can help us to help care partners to understand, clarify, and distinguish needs, their own and their partners. It helps us become highly attuned to ourselves, as we just talked about. But as we become more attuned to ourselves and our needs, we become better at being more attuned to our partner and their needs. This cartoon says, "Of course I care about how you imagined I thought you perceived what I wanted you to feel." Oh. Mindfulness practice allows us to prepare for interactions and assess our well-being and how we're entering into an interaction and what we need in that moment, as well as understanding what our partner might need more clearly. Caregiving with mindfulness and presence becomes a practice of well-being and not the source of dis-ease or disease or an obstacle to care. So let's learn another practice. This is a fundamental practice we learn in mindfulness class, and this is called stop practice. So we'll practice together. You can do this all throughout the day. Maybe when you notice stress creeping up or whatever your tell is, maybe it's like you said, you feel the heat or a tightness in your chest or something in your stomach. As you practice mindfulness, you get better and better at noticing this and just stopping. Just stop. I always place a hand on my heart. You don't have to do this, but I do it to remind myself to turn inward with kindness, friendliness. So the S in stop stands for stop. The T stands for take a breath or 3. take 3 deep breaths, maybe the deepest breaths you've taken today, and allow your attention to stay with your breath wherever you feel it most strongly. Even taking 3 deep breaths will activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's a powerful tool. The O in stop is to observe what's happening, just as we've done in our other check-ins. What is the quality of your mind? Is it racing? Is it calm? Perhaps inviting it to come back to your lap. What sensations are present? Softening around any tightness you might feel, if possible. Noticing if any sounds are present, any emotions are present. So being present with whatever is. And the P stands for proceed, but you might want to, I usually add a little praise, thanking myself for taking this moment out to stop and notice where I am now, what I might be bringing into my next interaction, perhaps reframing or calling up an attitude that I want to cultivate, like, may I be patient? Or where is patience in this moment? Noticing what you might need before beginning again. Now, we only took a couple of minutes to do this. You can open your eyes. Noticing after you stop if there's any change. Here's what Sandy says. Sandy is a caregiver that we work with about little stops.
The other thing was the little stop sign, and I laminated that on a stone, and I carried that in my pocket. And then every time I needed it, it was in my pocket, and I would feel it, and then I went through the 4 steps. And that was a huge game changer too. My husband is now living in a memory care facility, and I'm able to go back and visit him again. And I always stop at the door and greet him so that before I'm right there in his face, and just do it naturally. Just approach someone slowly, I guess, is the key.
So Sandy is talking about little stops. And in the class that we teach, we actually give people stop signs and ask them to post them throughout their house as a reminder. Every time you open the fridge, or every time you start your workday, or on your computer, or every time you get in the car, just to stop. To stop, take a breath, observe what's happening, make any changes thoughtfully, and then proceed. So another practice that you can use is one that Sandy mentioned, which is before meeting, or sometimes we call it doorway practice. And this is a combination of stop and also kind of adjusting. So before you meet someone, or before you go to have an interaction with your partner, and I used to, when I was a caregiver for my dad before he passed away, I used doorway practice or before meeting practice all the time. It really was so helpful to me. My dad had a lot of behavioral symptoms, and it was often very challenging for me and for him during our interactions. And I noticed that I was bringing a lot of expectations to these interactions. Like I was actually bracing against them and bringing a lot of stress into the interactions. And I noticed that my dad was then mirroring my emotions. So the more stress I brought in, the more he was stressed, and then the more symptoms he had. And so I began this doorway practice or before meeting practice, and it completely changed our dynamic. So you begin with stop before the interaction. Before I would go in to see my dad or interact with him, I would just stop. I put my hand on my heart, take a breath, or 3, observe what was happening. What am I bringing in right now? Am I stressed? Can I soften that? Am I leading with frustration or agitation? Can I soften that? And when ready, I would just connect with my compassionate intention for myself and the other person, starting with wishing myself well, wishing myself what it was that I needed in the moment. So if I was feeling really stressed or bringing in an attitude of frustration, I might say, may I be patient. May I be patient. May I be calm. May I be kind. May I be present. And I might say this to myself a few times, slowly finding patience, calm, kindness, presence in the moment. And then I would actually physically put my hand out and wish my dad these things. May you be patient. May you be calm. May you be kind. May you be present. And then I might wish for both of us. May we be patient. May we be calm. May we be kind. May we be present. And then opening my eyes and beginning the interaction. This changed our interactions because I brought into the interaction mostly, I came into the interaction with a calm and centered presence, and my dad mirrored that. And not always, but even if he was upset, it allowed me to navigate that and to dance and surf with that a little more easily because I was starting with my feet on the ground, not slipping on the banana peel. So that's one practice to bring with. Another way mindfulness supports caregivers is through integrating self-care and recognizing the importance and impact of brief releases and breaks from caring during the day. So this cartoon says, I can't sleep. I think I'll get up and solve all my problems. It's really important. We all say we want to take care of ourselves, but how do we really do that? What's our plan for that? What are our help refuges? What are the things that we can retreat to that build us up, that build our resilience? This is Carol.
It does reinforce for me the importance of caring for yourself, and that, you need to put your own, as they tell you on the airlines, putting your oxygen mask on first is so important. And do not ever minimize that value, because you taking care of yourself, which we're not always great at, is the most important thing you can do. Because if something happens to you, then that person you're caring for is really gonna be in a tough spot. And there just aren't that many resources out there that provide so much support for the person giving the care and give you that space to feel that you're worthy of that, even though you don't have Alzheimer's, or in the broad scheme of things between you and your partner, you're okay. Gosh, you're perfect. But there is so much care of self that really allows you to continue being a caregiver and allows you to continue caring for the rest of your family, which is as important as anything else.
So RuPaul says, if you can't love yourself, how the heck are you going to love someone else? And the same is true about care. If you can't care for yourself, how the heck are you going to care for someone else? And what's important here is to know your refuges. Now, what is a refuge? A refuge is whatever brings you back to your grounded, secure, safe, centered self, right? Whatever does that. And it might be being present and focusing on your breath. It might be mindfulness. It might be saying a saying that reminds you to come back. It might be a prayer, or a teaching, or a poem. You might find refuge in music, in meditation, in yoga, Tai Chi. You might find refuge in retreat or contemplation. It's important to know, what are your refuges? What is something that brings you back to your calm and centered presence, your core self, that self that is calm and loving and kind and stable and sewing? Please feel free to put in chat, what's one refuge for you? Sewing, another practice that brings attention to the present moment, doesn't it? What are other refuges? Something that brings you back to yourself. Walking, nature, the beach, music, guitar, spirituality, painting, surfing or bodyboarding, reading, writing, laughter, gardening, swimming. All these practices. And it may be worthwhile taking a relaxing breath, chatting with a friend, being in nature, no distractions, right? So it may be worthwhile to, after this talk, just write down some of your refuges and notice how often you are in them. And can you make more space for refuge in your life, in your daily routine? So, number 4, mindfulness helps us to balance the negativity bias. Mindfulness helps care partners in noticing a full range of experiences and how powerful and demanding negative experiences are in hogging up our attention, right? Mindfulness offers us space to acknowledge difficult things while also allowing space for taking in the good. It's a both and, not sugarcoating, but recognizing that there are really difficult things, but there is also joy. And there are also a lot of just okay moments where we're just okay. Nothing's great, but nothing's bad, right? So mindfulness helps us to be deeply curious and to cultivate understanding about and valuing taking in the good and cultivating gratitude, right? To balance out our brain's negativity bias. Our brain is actually wired to focus on what's wrong or what could go wrong. And the reason for that is because over evolution, we're wired to react. If there's a stirring in the bushes, we're wired to run away, right? It might be a tiger, right? So if it's a tiger and we ran away, we survive another day. But if it was a piece of cake that rattled the bushes and we run away, well, we miss a piece of cake. That's no big deal. So our brain is wired to keep us safe, which is great, right? Isn't that neat? Without even our conscious control, our brain's trying to keep us safe. So it's wired to pay attention to the negative much more than the positive. And so through mindfulness, we can expand our attention to not just include the negative, our brains are sticky for negative, but also include the positive. What's happening that's going well? Really, we know to combat the negativity bias, we actually have to focus on and savor moments of joy, because those are like Teflon, they slip away, right? So to balance the negativity bias, we need to spend a little more time focusing on joy. Mark Twain said, "I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened." So when the brain is mindless, you can think of this as autopilot. How many of you have ever driven to the grocery store and gotten there and realized you can't even think of like what route you took? I mean, you were just completely on autopilot. And for most of us, about 47% of our waking time is on autopilot. We're just lost in thought. We're not present at all. We're spending half of our waking life not even present, right? So how does that impact our brain? Well, because when our brains are on autopilot, our brains are programmed to have a negativity bias. So our brains tend to move to the past or the future, both of which we're picking out negative things, right? We're focused on, like, in the past, things we did wrong, things that didn't go well. In the future, we tend to be more anxious about things that won't go well, or worries or concerns about something bad that's going to happen. That's usually what happens when we're on autopilot, right? There's actually a lot of studies around where your mind wanders or lands impacts your happiness and your well-being. So how can we restore equilibrium? Well, this is one quick trick that you can use to take in the good, and that's 3 good things. There was actually a really big Harvard study on gratitude that showed that you can increase your long-term happiness by almost 10%, which is huge actually, with one simple, fun, and free 5-minute exercise. And here it is. Write down 3 things that went well each day and their causes. 3 things that went well during your day and why they went well. That's it. We spend thousands of dollars on jet skis and houses and all kinds of things when we can increase our happiness by 10% by just writing down 3 things a day that brought us happiness and why. Great practice. If you want to throw in the chat one thing that brought you happiness today, maybe it was the first cup of coffee, maybe it was bird song, whatever it was. Maybe.
Yeah, I think that the fact that the sessions.
I'm going to skip that. A delicious chai tea latte. So gratitude is really, really important. Sprinkling in gratitude practice for taking in the good, really savoring good moments when they happen can help us balance the negativity bias. So maybe you can say one thing you're grateful for today, or one thing that made you happy today and why. So I am grateful to have a house over my head because it means I'm not shivering in the snow. It's snowing here today where I am. I'm very grateful for that. So an extra hour of sleep, doing something productive, having a roof over our heads, grateful the webinar. So if you keep a gratitude journal, this is another way to take in the good, where for 1 week, you just write down one thing, large or small, that you're grateful for, and add up a cause. Actually, there's research that shows if you say why, that increases your happiness even more. Notice how you feel when you are grateful. How does that feel in your body? Where do you feel it? I often feel it in my face. Maybe there's a smile, maybe there's a warmth in your heart, an opening. Noticing what stress feels like, but also noticing what taking in the good feels like, what savoring feels like. Listening to talks, grateful for being able to write, spending time with pets, connection. Thank you for sharing. Okay, this is the 5th thing. Mindfulness helps us to cultivate kindness, patience, and compassion. And many of you said that you wanted to cultivate kindness, patience and compassion. It helps us to understand that beating ourselves up only adds insult to injury and has a negative impact on the present and the future. I love this candy corn cartoon. Well, I like me. No one likes candy corn. Anyway, being kind and compassionate with ourselves is so important. If we can't be kind and compassionate with ourselves, it's going to be really hard to do that with anybody else, right? So we have to practice this, though. It's hard to do. It helps us to recognize that when we're having difficulty, when we're experiencing difficulty, we can apply kindness liberally to the affected area. Be on our own side. I'm actually going to skip that. So let's do a quick practice. I invite you again to come back to yourself, begin again. Close your eyes or soften your eyes. Let's maybe practice stop. Just stop. Take a few breaths. Following your breath as you breathe in. Noticing how the breath fills your chest. Breathing out, softening. Maybe imagining the air that you're breathing in, coming in and filling every cell, nourishing every cell of your body. And as you breathe out, letting go of what's no longer needed. Observing what's here now. Whatever's here. Noticing any sensations in your body, any thoughts that might be present without judgment, just with curiosity. If there is irritability or busyness, just noticing that. Maybe smiling with it. This is what this feels like, noticing what it's like in your body, in your mind. Allowing it to soften if it can. Just observing what it's like to be alive in this moment. Perhaps calling to mind something that you appreciate about yourself, perhaps appreciating that you showed up today, that you're here right now practicing learning something new to take care of yourself and your partner. Maybe even placing a hand on your heart and calling up one thing that you appreciate about yourself. Maybe one strength that you bring to the care partnering experience. One gift that you possess, one strength. Maybe you're a good organizer. Maybe you're able to bring your calm and centered presence to caregiving. Maybe you're good with finding support. What's one gift that you bring? One strength? Teamwork. Resilience. Noticing what it's like to deeply feel and extend warmth toward yourself, to give yourself what you need and what you would not hesitate to offer a friend. Simply giving to yourselves that which you need, which is love and appreciation without judgment. I invite you to open your eyes as you appreciate this one gift at least that you have, that you bring. Feel free to share in the chat one gift or strength that you bring. Calmness, acceptance, advocacy, sense of humor. You might even notice if it's harder to think of gifts, your gifts, and why that might be. Listening, love, sense of humor, showing up. What a gift. Kindness, smiling, caring, powerful peace, a wicked sense of humor. What a gift and strength. Lightheartedness, what a gift to bring to this caregiving experience. You bring so many gifts. It might be useful to take a moment out and just appreciate yourself for all that you're already doing, all that you're already sharing. Feel free to come back, open your eyes if they were closed. Notice what it's like to feel into appreciation for yourself, for your gifts. So what are some reasons to practice mindfulness? Well, there's a lot of research around mindfulness reducing stress and improving mental and physical health, increasing self-efficacy or the feeling of control or abilities in care partners, improving well-being of yourself and the person in your care. And it also can help to decrease the frequency of challenging interactions or behavioral symptoms. Essentially, mindfulness practice helps you show up from a calm and centered place, and that allows you to have more positive experiences, which then allows the person with dementia to have more positive experiences and less need for behavioral symptoms, which reduces your stress, which allows you to practice more, which allows you to bring more positive experiences. And it's kind of a circle, right? It's kind of a self-fulfilling circle. Well, let's hear what Joan has to say.
When you start to notice changes in behavior with somebody you've been living with for a very long time, you have certain expectations about how that interaction and that relationship is going to work. And when you start to see changes that don't fit with the person that you've known all those years, for instance, not initiating as many things as they have in the past of joint kinds of things, or reacting in an upset and angry way, which is out of character for them, it causes you to feel angry and not valued by that person. And so you have that initial reaction. And what mindfulness does is gives you a sense you have a choice about how do you respond. Are you going to respond to those new behaviors, or are you going to stop and observe and take some time to reflect and start to figure out what's going on and see how that might change what's happening? And that's a whole process that doesn't take place in a day.
Right, it's a practice. So we talked about a lot today. So I'll just recap real quickly some practices that we actually practice for your toolbox. We talked about formal practice, which is just taking or carving out some time to sit and meditate, which means just bringing your attention back again and again to your breath or your body. You can listen to guided meditations like I gave you today, where you're sort of guided through what to pay attention to. And then I also introduced you some informal or micro practices that you can pepper into your day, like stop, where we stop, take a breath, observe what's happening, maybe praise ourselves for doing that, decide what choices we want to make, what we want to bring to the next interaction, and proceed. You can put up stop signs all over your house to remind yourself to do this. We added on to stop practice, this before meeting or doorway practice, where we add on before interacting, stop, and then wishing ourselves what it is we need to bring our calm and centered presence to the next interaction, and then wishing those things for the other person and maybe for all of us together, that we may find patience or kindness or whatever we need in the moment. We talked about 3 good things, writing down 3 good things that happened in the day and why, and gratitude practice, writing down one thing you're grateful for each day and why. I am grateful for blank because blank. These allow us not to sugarcoat bad things, but to balance them out. Because our brains are sticky for bad and slippery for good, this kind of practice can increase our happiness, and happiness is contagious, just like unhappiness. So our greater well-being will lead to our partner having greater well-being, especially someone with dementia who loses the ability to generate that on their own. They're really relying on you to set the tone. So if your tone is calm and smooth and kind, they're likely to mirror that. But that takes practice, doesn't it? It's very hard. It takes practice. And then we talked about self-appreciation practice, taking a moment out to appreciate what we're already doing well, what our strengths are, what we're doing so well. So much of our time we focus on what we're not doing right. What would happen if we focused even just once a day on what it is we did well? We also talked about refuges and understanding what those are. So feel free to write one thing you might try or bring into your future practice, your future routine. Is there anything I talked about you might try at home? Stop and gratitude. Anybody else? Stop and doorway practice. 3 things. Breath, stop and take even 3 breaths, deep breaths, will activate your parasympathetic nervous system. Before meeting, find my refuge. More space for refuge before meeting, doorway practice. Awesome. So it's important to remember that these things are a practice and not a perfect, okay? We may be perfectly zen in 1 minute and then something happens and we slip on the banana peel. The important thing is you're never going to eliminate slipping on the banana peel. We're all going to slip on the banana peel, right? The important thing is what we do with that when we slip. We just begin again, right? Can we practice just beginning again, stopping, beginning again, right? Not beating ourselves up and saying, I'll never be able to do this. Nope, we just stop and begin again. This is what Bobby says.
It really works. I mean, you don't think it does at first. There's no way to do it right or wrong or good or bad. It's a process, and it will always be a process. And you really learn only after doing it many, many times how powerful and helpful a tool it is. And it's always a process. It's always a learning. It's not, I'm now a master at mindfulness.
Right. This cartoon, someone said they loved it. I love this cartoon. Someone in my mindfulness group sent this to me, and I've used it in every presentation since. I just love it. Yeah, we were so calm, and then something happened, we're off balance. But at any moment, that's an opportunity to practice mindfulness, just to begin again. With that next breath, an opportunity to begin again, turning toward ourselves with kindness. So what can you do practicing forward? You can read, listen, or practice at home or in your community. You can take a mindfulness class like mindfulness-based stress reduction or mindfulness-based dementia care, which is a class we teach. There's also a mindfulness-based self-compassion class, which is amazing. These are 8-week intensive classes that ground you in these practices. You can go, there are mindfulness retreats where you can go and practice mindfulness for a half day. And these really ground you into the experience of mindfulness so that when things are happening, you can fall back on that learning and that experience. These are some resources. The Presence Care Project is the collaborative that I belong to, which is a number of us who believe in cultivating mindfulness for care partners. There's also a lot of apps you can download that have recorded meditations. The Presence Care website also has recorded meditations that you can listen to, carving out even 5 minutes a day to practice awareness of breath can really change your life. It's transformative. So in closing, what I'll say is that caregiving is as hard as anything you've ever done. This is Olivia Ames Hoblitzell, who I just adore. She said, remember that caregiving is as hard as anything you've ever done. Whatever happens, and we all know all the unpredictable, alarming things that can, the most valuable response is your steady, calm, and caring presence. And mindfulness helps us cultivate our steady, calm, and caring presence. So with that, I will stop and entertain any questions that people have. I will stop the recording.